If this is your first attempt at growing sweet potatoes, there are at least a few things to consider after growing the slips, but before planting them. These are all mistakes that I made last year, and as a result, the harvest was abysmal. I will also show you what I'm doing different this year. The first mistake was not lifting up the vines from time to time. If this isn't a part of the garden chores, you'll end up with the plant focusing more on growing more sweet potatoes along the entirety of the vine instead of the main tubers you started from slips. This year, I avoided this entirely by putting straw mulch down. The straw mulch was about 2 inches deep. I'll admit, I did even worse reminding myself to lift the vines, but each of the whopping 2 times I remembered, I noticed none were attached or trying to grow roots. Just lots of leaves along the entire vine. Mistake number 2 was planting the slips in shallow beds. The only place I had to plant sweet potatoes because of the next point is in the front beds where it's hard packed dirt. I had to dig as far as I could with other plants around, and it only ended up being about 6 to 8 inches deep. So there wasn't a lot of room for the roots to really get in and grow larger. There just wasn't a lot of space to spread out. So this year, we created an entirely new bed. It's 3 feet wide, 8 feet long, and 18 inches deep. I'm also trying out a new watering system that handles deeper roots. With a deeper bed, it has more chance of retaining water. I think we had a lot of evaporation in the very shallow bed area, especially with as much heat as we get in the middle of the day. Next up is starting too late. Slips need a month to grow. Sweet potatoes need a long hot season to grow. If they're started too late in the season, there will not be long enough to grow big tubers. Here in the Phoenix Metro or in Zone 9B, we need to start growing anywhere from March to the end of June. And I'll admit, this first round, I was closer to putting the slips in the bed at the very end of June. So there just wasn't a long enough season. This year, I started in March. Mistake number 4 is growing next to unfriendly plants. You've probably heard of companion planting. This is the opposite. And while I didn't necessarily plant the slips next to unfriendly plants, I certainly tried growing slips near plants that would be competing for the same nutrients in the soil or would attract the wrong kind of bugs. I put the potatoes directly out in the yard, of which the first place that I put it was in between squash, tomatoes, sunflowers, all things that you're not supposed to put around sweet potatoes. So I was forced to move my slip experiment from the in-ground and raised garden beds I wanted to use to the garden beds in the front that would be more friendly to sweet potatoes. You can see our front entryway is an oasis of basil. In the big, what I call sweet potato bed, I planted corn to start us off and then a couple of other leafy things that died in the beginning of summer. But the roselle hibiscus that I also planted at the same time as the corn did really well. It also provided some shade since this bed is entirely in the sun from about 5 in the morning until 5 at night. And this year, we had over 30 consecutive days of 110 plus degrees. Now you might have noticed the shade cloth structure that I put in place for a couple months in the middle of the summer. It was towards the end of the spring when the corn was really getting fried, and of course the sweet potatoes were also in that bed, so it also got the benefit of just a little bit of shade throughout the middle of the day. Number 5, which may not even be a mistake, is to be ready for volunteers to grow next year. This is not what I planted. I planted the beans, but these 2 sweet potatoes, these are from last year. This is awesome. Volunteers are so much easier than growing slips. Wherever you plant your sweet potatoes, expect them to come back.
Oh, you are hiding.
Even the little roots that you didn't mean to leave behind have an opportunity to grow into another entire plant.
Let's keep digging. There might be more.
Just be prepared. If you decide to change the locations later, You just have to pull them out as they appear. Now, I don't really expect to get sweet potatoes out of these older beds, but it's nice ground cover, so I left them in place, especially in the areas where plants didn't end up growing just because of the heat. If you're in the stage where you are still trying to grow sweet potato slips, I've tried several different methods. There's definitely one that works so much better than the rest. Check it out right here.